What is Stockholm Syndrome? Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological response. It occurs when hostages or abuse victims bond with their captors or abusers. This psychological connection develops over the course of the days, weeks, months, or even years of captivity or abuse. With this syndrome, hostages or abuse victims may come to sympathize with their captors. This is the opposite of the fear, terror, and disdain that might be expected from the victims in these situations. Over the course of time, some victims do come to develop positive feelings toward their captors. They may even begin to feel as if they share common goals and causes. The victim may begin to develop negative feelings toward the police or authorities. They may resent anyone who may be trying to help them escape from the dangerous situation they're in. This paradox does not happen with every hostage or victim, and it's unclear why it occurs when it does. Many psychologists and medical professionals consider Stockholm Syndrome a coping mechanism, or a way to help victims handle the trauma of a terrifying situation. Indeed, the history of the syndrome may help explain why that is. What is the history? Episodes of what is known as Stockholm Syndrome have likely occurred for many decades, even centuries. But it wasn't until 1973 that this response to entrapment or abuse came to be named. That's when two men held four people hostage for 6 days after a bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden. Now I will leave you with this little account of what happened in 1973 in Sweden.
At the entrance of the Sveriges Credit Bank, Jan Erik Olsson, by profession a robber, pulled out a machine gun he kept under his jacket, waving a series of shots toward the ceiling, and shouted,
"Everybody down on the ground, shut up and stand still."
It seems like a perfect robbery, except that a passing patrol, hearing the gunshots, calls for backup, enters and besieges the robber. A violent shootout begins between the police and the robber, who is cornered and decides to free everyone present. Except 4 employees, whom he holds as hostages: the cashier Elizabeth, the stenographer Kristin, Brigitte, a clerk, and Sven, who had been hired a few days before. Olsson barricades himself in the vault, but before the door is closed he makes demands not to kill the hostages. A fast car, 3 million kroner, and that his friend Clark Olofsson, then in prison, be freed. The robber manages to win the sympathy and help of his captors, who minute by minute see the police as the real danger. Already during the kidnapping a few things happen that draw attention to the developing relationship between hostages and robbers. During the first day, Elizabeth has to go to the bathroom, and she asks Jan Erik Olsson if she can use the restroom, which is located down the hall a stone's throw from the policeman. Surprisingly, Jan agrees, and Elizabeth, despite being only a few feet from freedom, once she is finished, instead of running away, returns to her captors. Negotiations begin, and Olsson even talks on the phone with the Swedish Prime Minister at the time, Olof Palme. During the first phone call, Olsson threatens to kill the hostages. Before Olsson hangs up the phone, the Prime Minister hears the woman's frightened cries.
"I'm sorry for how I acted yesterday and my shouting. I was worried about the police trying to break into the vault. I want to tell the President that you 2 robbers and us hostages must be free."
On August 28, 5 days later, police special units began pumping gas inside of the bank vault. Olsson surrendered and turned himself into law enforcement. But on the way out of the bank, some hostages embraced the robber.
The syndrome is often evoked in journalistic accounts or fictional works, but it is not included in any international psychiatric classification system. The hostages defended their captors after being released and did not agree to testify in court against them. It was noted that in this case, however, the police were perceived to have little concern for the hostages' safety, providing an alternative reason for their reluctance to testify. The Stockholm Syndrome is paradoxical because the prisoners' feelings of sympathy toward their captors are the opposite of the fear and contempt a bystander might feel toward the captors. If you liked the video, I ask you to please comment, leave a like, and subscribe so you don't miss future videos.